Hello, everyone, and welcome to Decisive Campaigns, the Blitzkrieg from Warsaw to Paris. I'll be starting up a new campaign here, but before we do that, this episode is sponsored by one of my Patreon supporters, Pumnorao. It is support like his that makes it possible for me to make these extra campaigns, so if you would like to see different games as well, head down to patreon.com, see which level of support suits you. With that said, let's start let's just say grand campaign. First of all, let's go through the settings. So I'll be playing with slow AI speed because that generates the best AI. I will probably not show off the AI turn because that'll just generally take too long. I think slow AI speed, like, you're really waiting for 5 to 10 minutes during the enemy's turn, and even though it's fine for me watching that, it's not fun for you to be watching that. So I will not necessarily show off the AI turn, but I will show off what they did. Then, when it comes to AI difficulty, there are quite a few different ones. Personally, I like to play on normal AI difficulty because I don't like giving the AI bonuses. Like, it does not seem right for me to have, say, French units that are 40% stronger on average than German units. It's just a bit weird. So I like to play that on normal. But at the same time, I will be playing... I can either play challenging or hard. I haven't really made up my mind. I think challenging is probably a good place to start with. Since I think Decisive Campaigns, it's actually pretty tricky. In general, if you've watched my old channel, you would have seen how both Decisive Campaigns, Case Blue, and Barbarossa, let's just say they were challenging. Like, it was not easy to win those campaigns, and I think, and I played those, I believe, even on normal difficulty. So let's just go for a challenging campaign and just see, how tough it is. I've never played this Decisive Campaigns before, so it's going to be interesting for me too. I have no experience with this whatsoever. So yeah, that will be quite interesting. As for the campaign, I'll just be reading this. In the campaign, the German player will have to play and win Case White, Case Yellow, and Operation Sea Lion in succession. Depending on the difficulty level, a number of random variants will be active. Before the start of each scenario, the German player will be able to invest political points in 3 fields of intelligence. Investing in intelligence improves your chances discovering which particular variants will be active before the scenario starts. The tactical advantages of having this information are obvious. You do not want to launch a major air offensive if your weather report intelligence suggests a high probability of heavy rain, fog, and cloud cover over your targets. If the German player knows in advance which variants will be active, then he may well be able to avoid their negative consequences by paying for, and at the right moment playing an action card that either negates or greatly diminishes the harmful effects of those variants. The German player may also choose to save his political points for later use in the scenario. For example, to purchase an extra division when the outcome of a battle is poised to go either way. Victory or defeat, and a sudden reinforcement arriving in the right hex at the right time may tip the balance in your favor. There's an element of poker game risk involved in this decision-making process because each campaign scenario is progressively more challenging than the last. You may decide to accept heavier losses and a lesser category of outcome in an early scenario in order to have a tactical ace in the hole available to you later on, when the consequences of victory or defeat may be more fraught with portent. And you, playing an action card that counters or diminishes the effects of the variant, the German player can also choose to save his political points for use in scenario to, for example, buy extra divisions. As the scenarios increase in difficulty as each campaign unfolds, it's usually a wise strategy to hoard as many political points as you can before embarking on Case Yellow, or most especially Operation Sea Lion, as both of those campaign scenarios can make or break your reputation, even determine your place in history. In the campaign, the role of Supreme German Commander is always assigned to a human player instead of the AI, but the campaign mode is always a dramatic contest when played head-to-head by two human field marshals, because it offers such a rich variety of alternative history possibilities. If you play the historical campaign mode, you play in the easiest mode, no variants will be activated. If you play in any of the other modes, the overall progression of big events will more or less conform to the schedule and strategic priorities demonstrated by both sides in the actual historical record of events. This doesn't, however, mean that players are locked into repeating the strategies followed by their real-life predecessors. It does, however, mean that there will be no huge history-changing anomalies, no Nazi A-bomb in 1944, that kind of thing. And games played in this mode tend to be characterized by more frequent, subtle diversions from the historical record, a level of differentness that many players find attractive and compelling in its own right, but not so jarringly anachronistic that it shifts the entire global conflict slightly in the direction of science fiction. So what can you expect from a challenging campaign? Well, or a hard or very hard campaign? I will show that off later when I will talk about the variants as well. Let's just play a challenging campaign so far, and let's just start it up here. It is the year 1939, August the 22nd. At the Berghof, the German High Command finalizes the planning for Case White, the invasion of Poland. Though some generals, like Keitel, point out the vital industrial Ruhr area is vulnerable to a French counterstrike if the bulk of the Wehrmacht is committed in Poland, it is decided that the Western Allies lack the political will either to violate Belgium's neutrality or to risk incurring the sort of heavy losses that will result from a determined offensive against the West Wall or Siegfried Line. Furthermore, von Bock and like-minded generals believed that dividing forces over two fronts might water down the Germans' force ratio advantage over the Polish army and thus unnecessarily drag out the conquest of Poland. All efforts have thus been focused on massing German forces on the Polish border to conduct a fast and furious Blitzkrieg campaign aimed at breaking Polish resistance within 3 weeks. In order to minimize the chances of either significant Allied countermeasures or second-thought treachery on the part of Stalin, German diplomatic efforts and Soviet territorial greed have caused the Soviet Union to agree to the partition of Poland. But the longer the fighting there goes on, the more paranoid Stalin is likely to become about Germany's ultimate intentions vis-à-vis the USSR. If the Poles aren't crushed swiftly, Stalin may decide his best option is to aid them, not invade them. Case White will start on September 1st, 1939, and should be completed on the start of round 12, September 23rd. Maximum allowable casualty rate for the German side is 10%. I can now play action cards to influence the upcoming campaign. So this is what they were talking about. We have 50 political points, and there are 3 areas of, let's just say, expertise that we can invest in order to see whether a certain variant will play into effect. And it's every time we invest in such a card, we increase the chances by 30%. And we would be seeing whether a certain variant is active after playing this card. So say that I would be playing my Meteorology card right now. That would increase my chances of seeing whether a weather variant is active by 30% for this mission. Say... so then I can only assume there will be a die roll from 0 to 100 to see whether I will be able to see which variant applies. Then if I make the check, then I will immediately see whether one of the weather variants will be active after playing this card. And the same applies for something with military intelligence and with foreign affairs. So let's just start with meteorology, and our prediction level is increased. We didn't see anything that would indicate a variant, but of course we only had a 30% chance. And the game doesn't tell you whether whether such variant just isn't active, or that it's active but we don't know it yet. The game will obviously not tell you this. Let's also play the military intelligence one. I do think that these are pretty important to do, because depending on what happens, such a variant can be really nasty. Although, now that we have say that we were to play foreign affairs, that would practically mean that we would come to 26. And say that we were to find out that the British have decided to send an expeditionary force to Poland, then we already lack the political points to request the Øresund Strait to be blocked. We would have to play the less troops card for 25 extra points in order to then play the block Øresund card. But those are, trade-offs that you'll have to make. I will play the foreign affairs card as well. Quality and quantity of our foreign affairs is increased. Unfortunately, we didn't see whether any variant is active. I can play this intelligence so we can actually see what happens. So the chance to discover foreign affairs variants now is 30. Military intelligence is 30. Meteorology is 30. I guess foreign affairs variants last check was also 30. That's weird. Alright, so those are the cards that are there to discover the variants. Intelligence is just a quick update on how you're standing with those intelligence and things. Now, as for the variants, in the case-wide scenario, there's a variant where the British will send an expeditionary force to Poland, more specifically Gdynia. You can block that with the block Øresund card. There's a variant in which Stalin will help the Poles and not fight them. We'll go into detail later why. And then you can play the Stalin guarantees card to tell Hitler, hey, we want to have more guarantees from Stalin because we fear that he will go and attack us. That will also cost political points. We can ask for more time during this scenario, which will provide us an additional 4 days to complete the conquest of Poland, which equals 2 turns. Because we start on the 1st, we have 12 turns until the 23rd, which means that each turn is 2 days. More time means you have 2 additional turns in order to capture your objectives. Then there's the less troops card, which, an officer who claims he can do the job with fewer resources demonstrates boldness and resolve and an extra degree of tactical savvy. Such officers are highly valuable if they can do the job. I think if they succeed in a job, whatever. We can't read it. I don't know why they did it like this. It's a bit weird because I also cannot zoom in on the card, so I can't read it entirely. Anyway, the less troops card negates the variant in which the French and British launch a heavier Saar offensive than they historically did. So then if you don't play the less troops card, OKH will take more forces from you. So if you play the less troops card, I believe 7 divisions will be taken. But if you don't play the less troops card and the variant in which the Saar offensives is heavier takes place, then OKH will take, it's like 9 or 10 divisions. So the less troops variant protects you from that and gives you a 25-point increase in political points. Yes, they will take 7 divisions, I believe. I'm not sure how many specifically, but it will automatically protect you against that variant. And I get 25 political points. That does make the first scenario significantly harder, obviously, because we have a lot less divisions. But I do think that in the grand scheme of things, this is probably useful to play, especially since we don't know whether that variant will be active. But we'll see. Let's play the less troops card. The High Command decides to keep more infantry divisions, air, flak and artillery assets behind the Siegfried line. This may inconvenience the German player, but by winning with a smaller advantage, he will gain prestige and political points. Furthermore, it will prove a prudent move if the Western Allies decide to attack the Ruhr area, while the brunt of the Wehrmacht is occupied in Poland. Alright, so I'm not going to play the more time card. Let's just go to war here. The plans for Case White have been finalized. German generals dispersed to the front, ready to launch the first Blitzkrieg. And then we'll probably also see which variants are active immediately. I'm not 100% sure on whether a certain difficulty level makes it so that all the variants are spread out over the 3 missions or not. So it's not clear to me whether a challenging campaign, say that in a challenging campaign there will be a total of 3 variants, whether all those variants could be in one mission potentially, or they are spread out evenly. I'm not sure. I would have to check up on that. Like I said, I'm new to this game. I haven't really played it. I've just made myself a bit familiar with the basics of the game, in the sense that I know how to move my units and how the card system works and things like that. It is the year 1939, September the 1st. After negotiations and diplomacy failed to bring Polish concessions, case white, the invasion of Poland has commenced. It's a rain weather turn. Ah, see? Whew. The French have started an offensive in the west. I think this is misspelled though. Apart is not with two P's, I think. I'm not sure actually now. From the troops that were planned to be withdrawn, no further withdrawals are made. Haha, great. So they did trigger that variant, but I did play that card, so that works out perfectly. That's really good. Georg von Kugler reports that Brigade Eberhard has taken Danzig without a struggle. As the victory status, Germany has 19 VPs and needs... yeah, we'll go over this in a bit. So let's just go to the map first. And I want to check one thing before we start, because I have to record this differently. I tried to record this with OBS before, but the problem with this game is that whenever you do attacks or on certain triggers, there's this very nasty sound which plays. And no matter how low or whether I even turn off game sounds, that noise is still there. And I don't want that noise to be there, so I actually decided to use another recording program. But that recording program does not always record the game itself. It might actually not do that. So I'll be back in 1 second to see whether it actually records the game. Otherwise, I'll be basically talking with my background screen there, and it would be fairly useless to do this. So I'll be right back. Okay, great. So I'm really happy that it is indeed recording the back of the screen here, or the actual game. So that's quite nice. All right. So we do have the screen here. There's also the minimap and things like that. Let's just go over the way this game works. I guess this first episode is kind of an introductory scenario. I will most likely not show off any gameplay here during the first scenario, maybe very limited, but this is just here to get you introduced to the game and to talk a little bit about how this works. Yeah, not every single episode is going to be action-packed. I will also mention that in the description of the video, so don't worry about that. Anyway, first we have the preferences. That doesn't really do anything except it deals with the maps and things like that. So, and the sounds. Let's start here with the brief. We have a lot to talk about. Germany is about to invade Poland. On the eve of the invasion, England signs a military pact with Poland. This strengthens the Polish resolve not to give in to German demands. Poland is promised immediate military support by the Western powers and thinks if it manages to hold out for a few months, Germany might be defeated in the West. The German High Command believes that these promises of English and French support are just bluff. Though wrong on that account, the Germans did hold a trump card up their sleeves. Unknown to Poland, Germany has made a secret pact with the Soviet Union providing for a Soviet invasion of eastern Poland. That's the prelude to this battle. Yeah, like I said, there's a lot of text, but I actually think it's pretty interesting to read through this. So this episode is more for people who are interested in the background, I suppose. The terrain. An important feature of the landscape is the low plain of central and northern Poland. The flat terrain provides excellent ground for mobile warfare, although it's raining. The plain provides a direct route between Berlin and Warsaw. Though this might seem to put the defender in a hopeless situation, there's some light at the end of the tunnel for the Polish defenders. The Polish rivers run south to north and provide excellent defensive lines if properly defended. The south of Poland is more mountainous, and the Tatra mountain channel border traffic with former Czechoslovakia to just a few mountain passes. However, the narrowest parts of those passes mostly lie on the wrong side of the border, which diminishes their usefulness for defending against offensive from the south. Almost 30% of Poland is forested. Most forests can be found in the north, east, and south. They'll provide the defenders with air cover and strong points for defense. The Polish population is most dense west of Krakow and around Warsaw. Other populous areas are the industrial and manufacturing areas around Lutz and a strong strip of industrial development and agricultural productivity above the Tatra Mountains. Other areas are mostly rural. Populous areas provide dense urban landscape and thus defensive opportunities. The rail system in Poland is excellent and extensive. However, the width between the rails used on Polish rail tracks differ from the German rail tracks, and this means that some modification time is needed for Germans to convert the track width of captured rail lines so they can make full use of them. The roads are not good, but adequate, as long as the weather is fair. If there is a lot of rain, the big rivers in the Central Plains tend to rise over their banks and flood large areas of rural land. This might be a huge obstacle to an invading force so heavily reliant on mechanization as the Germans. Normally, September marks the start of the rainy season in Poland, but in 1939 conditions remained abnormally dry and the ground firm. Hitler weather, the Poles called it. The eastern part of Poland is off map, but consists mainly of forest and swamps. It will be occupied by the Soviets if they invade. The Germans, under overall command of Walter von Brauchich's 5 armies, have amassed on the Polish borders. Army Group North, commanded by Fitter von Bock, comprises the 3rd and the 4th Army and totals 330,000 men. 3,000 artillery pieces, 780 tanks, and 830 aircraft. Under command of von Rundstedt, Army Group South, the 8th, 10th, and 14th Armies comprises 500,000 men, 5,000 artillery pieces, 1,900 tanks, and 580 aircraft. Of the total of 2,600 tanks, only 400 are modern medium tanks, Panzer III and Panzer IV models. The troops are led by well-trained staff officers and excellent generals. German supply flows from Frankfurt am Oder. The Poles. Under overall command of Riedzmigli, Polish forces are deployed in several operational groups. On the western frontier, from north to south, are Operational Group Pomorze, Poznan, Lutz, Krakow, and on the northern frontier, Madlin and Naru. Defending the southern border along the Slovak border and the Tatra Mountains is Operational Group Karpaty. A number of infantry divisions and tank formations are held in general reserve under Riedzmigli. Total Polish forces comprise 620,000 infantry, 60,000 cavalry, 700 armored tanks, 180 armored cars, 180 tanks, and 375 aircraft. The large number of armored cars doesn't represent as significant an asset as it may appear, for most of the vehicles were obsolete, thin-skinned, and armed only with machine guns. Except for patrolling, security duties, and last-ditch attacks against unsupported infantry, they are of very limited battlefield utility. The actual Polish tanks are good, however, and can stand their ground against even the newest German models. There just aren't a lot of them to make a significant difference. The Polish Air Force, except for a few modern LOS bombers, has inferior machines compared to the Luftwaffe. Polish generals are fiercely motivated and brave, but they are poorly served by inexperienced staff officers. And at every level of command, the Poles are hampered by using communications technology that is a generation out of date. Polish supply flows from Warsaw and Lvov. So Lvov is obviously all the way down there. Let's go. Down here. Poles get 1 political point per round. Oh. Victory. I told you this was going to be a long talk. So I'm doing all the talking now, and then the next episode will start playing. There is a total of 58 VP on the map. Warsaw is the main target of the Germans. It's worth 10 VP, but capturing it does not automatically result in victory. As long as the Poles hold 11 VP, they will continue to fight. So if they hold only Warsaw, and only Warsaw, they will surrender. But then we do need to take places like Brest-Litovsk and Lublin, for example, and Lvov, Przemysl, things like that. Although it's tempting to retreat everything on Warsaw, Poland will lose the scenario if all its major towns except Warsaw have been occupied. The Germans must capture these victory points before or on round 12, December 23rd, unless the game is being played in campaign mode, in which case Germans are granted 4 additional days to achieve total conquest, if they play a more time card. If the Germans are played by the AI, they have till October 1st to complete their conquest of Poland. Each day the Germans win before their deadline gives them a bonus of 10 PP. We are playing the campaign. If you're playing campaign mode, excess losses above 10% carry to the next scenario. Also, evacuation. The political points translate to the next scenario in campaign mode. If playing the scenario standalone, no. Victory or defeat is determined on the start of the final German turn. If the deadline is September the 23rd, that means the German must use that round to grab all VP so that on the start of September 25th they will be awarded victory. If not, German defeat will result at the start of September 25th turn. It is important to realize that victory or defeat is solely determined by conquering or holding the needed VP. Losses only determine a measure of victory. Major, decisive, brilliant, or nothing to brag about. I do believe that Poles can evacuate, but then they form divisions in France, the more French escape. But we'll talk about that. The variants that could become active in this scenario. And then depending on how difficult you make your campaign, I think the more variants will be active. Let's actually... Yeah, this doesn't say anything about how many variants there are. Alright, let's just talk about the variants itself. One of the possibilities that you could see with the Meteorology card as well is an early rain season. So, historically the weather was good for invading Poland, or at least good enough. It was still raining and stuff, but there was no early rain season. Apart from the higher chance for a rain turn, all small rivers are turned into large rivers, and large rivers overflow their banks and flood the neighboring lands, causing extra swamp hexes to appear. This will present extra problems and delays for the Germans and may limit the effectiveness of their panzers. So, if that happens, you can see that all these major rivers which are here, they're tougher to cross than minor rivers, obviously. They cost a lot more movement points to cross, except at the bridge. But they will all overflow. So what you will get is, the Vistula will overflow, and there will be a lot more swamp areas around all of this, around Warsaw, over here. It will be all swamp. There's already a lot of swamp, and it will be even worse. So, not only that, they'll be even tougher to cross, and the minor rivers will turn into large rivers. Let's actually take a look. This is a minor river, and it will turn into a major river. Let's actually... I don't know whether I can see that right here from the hex. Whether it would show me, like, hey... Yeah, minor river to the south and southwest currently. Whereas at Poznan we can see there is a major river to the north, northeast and southeast, but those also have bridges present. You can see here the different modifiers for each different type of terrain. This is a urban landscape, which gives an attack modifier of 100 to infantry, but everything else pretty much suffers quite a bit, whereas just a regular fields will just give an attack modifier of 100 to everything. Now, you can see here that what the penalties are for example, attacking across a major river. Cross River, minus 50% for infantry, minus 75% for artillery, and tanks suffer even worse, minus 80% attack modifier for heavy tanks. So you can really see how difficult attacking across the river would be and which difficulties you're presented with if minor rivers turn into major rivers. For example, if we are to look at a cross-river attack over a minor river, you see that the penalty for infantry is only 25% and for tanks 50%. Comparing that to a major river means a double penalty. So every time you were to try to cross a river, you suffer double penalties compared to how the situation is historically. That's one of the worst things about this variant, together with being extra slow. Variant 2. Stalin breaks his promise. Stalin will not backstab the Poles. Worse, Stalin might allow volunteers to join the Poles in the fight against the fascists. There's a 33% chance per turn that Soviet volunteers will arrive in Grodno, Brest, and Lvov each turn. If you wonder why Stalin allows this, it is because the Poles have pledged secretly to secede Eastern Poland to Stalin after the Germans are repulsed. If you asked for extra guarantees from Stalin in the campaign mode, this variant will be cancelled. Variant 3. Western troops. The Royal Navy manages to break through the Skagerrak and disembarks 4 infantry divisions under command of Lord Gort, the British Expeditionary Force. Furthermore, a small air group of 72 Spitfires will be unloaded. The British will keep 4,000 supply points on Gdynia throughout the scenario. If you play the block Oresund Strait, this variant will be cancelled. Variant 4, the Western Offensive, which is the one that we got and conveniently countered. Due to an immediate offensive by the French in the west, the Germans will immediately pull back for home defense. 8 infantry and 2 panzer divisions, as well as 2 artillery, 2 flak, 1 dive bomber, 1 recon, and 1 bomber unit. Namely, the 3rd Army, 217th Infantry, the 4th Army, 23rd Infantry, 8th Army, 213th Infantry, 10th Army, the whole 9th Corps, the 18th and 19th Infantry, and the 16th Corps, 14th, 1st Panzer, 4th Panzer, plus flak and artillery, the 7th Corps, 62nd, 27th Infantry. From the 14th Army, they will take flak and artillery. They will take the 2nd Flieger Corps, I guess. From Army Group North, from Army Group South, they will take the 8th Flieger, the 10th. But if you played less troops in the campaign mode, you can keep your 16th Corps and its 2 panzer divisions plus 1 infantry division. So that's great. Not only do you counter that French attack, but also you get to keep more than you would if you didn't play the card. So that's very good. Variant 5, better Polish equipment. The Poles have gotten 400 modern Somua medium tanks from the French and have deployed them in 4 tank units near Kutno, Schettels, or Thorn. These are excellent tanks and should be able to take on the German Panzer IIIs and Panzer IVs. Variant 6. The Poles have a better strategy. The Poles have listened to the advice of the French and have deployed army groups Pomorze, Poznan, Lutz, and Krakow further inland. By doing so, the Polish forces are more concentrated and should be able to avoid piecemeal destruction, enabling them to mount a more stubborn defense. You can play it. Yeah, this is not interesting. Okay, that's that for the variants. Rules. First day is bad weather. This is historically accurate and gives the Polish Air Force a fighting chance. On subsequent days, there's a 25% chance of bad weather, 75% of clear skies. On a rain day, both air attacks and intercepts are reduced to only 25% of their nominal effectiveness. If the early rain variant is in effect, then there's a 50-50 chance of inclement weather on each game turn. This is much more typical of actual Polish weather conditions than the abnormally dry, clear conditions, Hitler weather, that prevailed in September 1939. Every round, the Poles have a 10% chance of receiving a full-strength reserve division in Warsaw, provided that they still hold the city. Also, in every round, there's a 5% chance that every major city still in Polish hands will receive an emergency reserve regiment. If Poland is controlled by the AI, this chance rises to 10%. Poland starts this scenario with 21 major cities. So this variant, okay, it's a variant apparently, can add significantly to Polish strength, provided the Poles enjoy a modicum of good luck. Okay, I guess that's like a card that the Poles can play maybe then? I'm not sure. Extra supply depot, cost is 10 PP. The Polish can play this card and select a major town to receive 5,000 supplies a turn. Active card will be added to remind player where the additional supplies are available. Alright. If you're playing the campaign, then upon surrender of Poland, all surviving Polish troops that can either reach the evacuation hex near Grodno or the evacuation hex near Lvov will be evacuated. The amount of evacuees will determine the amount of Polish divisions that will be raised in France. The amount of evacuees needed for forming of subsequent infantry divisions in France is 200, 300, 400, 500, 600. A maximum of 5 evacuee divisions can be activated in France using this variant. Alright. We can play cards, the buy infantry card at this point, cash in some political capital, and appeal to high command for some additional manpower on the front. We have the map here. We have 100 morale, 19 victory points. I guess the Poles also have 100 morale, 40 victory points. Of course, morale affects effectiveness of your troops. It is the year 1939, September the 1st. This reps is basically something that you can go through every day. It's like a report. It's a rain weather turn. The French have started an offensive in the west. And our victory status, currently we have 19 VP, need 49 to win. Poland has 40 and needs to hold 11. So obviously we need 30 VP here, because 40 minus 30 is 10, and then the Poles will lose. We will win because we have 49. German losses are 0, should stay under 10. Excess losses will carry to the next scenario. Polish losses are 0, but Germany must have captured necessary victory points before the end of the 23rd. Alright, this was a first introductionary scenario before we actually do get started with the game. I'm just indeed talking about how this game works. I guess a little bit of the history, their situation, etc., etc. So, yeah, I guess we'll get started with the actual game in the next one. Yeah, I know, like I said, not every episode always has all this gameplay, especially for a game which has so much to tell right at the start. And I know this game is not, like, this is a very old game already, compared to today's standards, I suppose. So most people might not necessarily be familiar with this game. I would be surprised if more people played this game than, for example, the Decisive Campaigns Barbarossa, which is of course the newer one. And because of that, it's also much more interactive and things like that. Obviously, this is a little bit simpler in its design, although it still has some cool stuff like these variants. Like, I really like that. That's not something that you see in the other Decisive Campaigns games, I believe. But it is very interesting to see something like that implemented in the game, because I really do think it is really cool, and it does look at some of the more, not necessarily more likely. I mean, some of them are pretty likely, like, you know, the Poles having a better strategy. It's like, yeah, okay, that could be it. They could have listened to the French and the British. They could have a bunch of Samoa tanks, for example. They could have, you know, bought them and have had them delivered. Things like that. I mean, I think the Stalin one is maybe a bit over the top, but not necessarily extremely so. So I quite like their idea of having these variants, and that's pretty cool. So it should be fun to be playing this, I think. So yeah, that's there, and we'll definitely get started in the next one. I know that the makers of Decisive Campaigns, I believe they are actually working on a Decisive Campaigns Wacht am Rhein. I am exceptionally looking forward to that. I did hear about that in one of the Matrix games streams or something. I don't remember specifically where that was. It was in December already, so quite a while back. I heard that they were busy with making a Decisive Campaigns Wacht am Rhein. I hope it will be as exciting as Decisive Campaigns Warsaw, because I really, really enjoyed that game with all the political intrigue, and you have to play out the generals against each other, and you constantly had one general complaining, about you taking panzer divisions from the other, and things like that. It was really great. I really enjoyed that. I really hope they'll be making something similar in Wacht am Rhein, or that they have some other gimmick that I think makes it worth to buy such a game. Because, quite frankly, we've seen, at least I have seen so many of these games. I really feel that each game should have something, I don't know, maybe something new to add to the board, or do things really well, because there are just so many games already that really do things really well that you really need to have something new, or do it even better to make it actually exciting. And that's like the problem with a game like, for example, Panzer Corps 2, which, I personally think it's a bad game, but you might say it's an okay-ish game, and that would be fine if there weren't already a lot of other games that do the same thing but better. Like, not to be rude, but they're making a grand campaign in Panzer Corps 2, but the grand campaign in Panzer Corps 1 is actually better, I feel like, just by design. The way they designed it and everything, it just, it works out better. So you're making something which doesn't really add something new except for better graphics, which is fine and all. At least arguably better graphics, let's just call it that. But they don't really add anything really new that warrants or makes it so that I really want to buy that game, right? And I do hope that Decisive Campaigns Wacht am Rhein will have something that will make me go, wow, I really want to buy this, except for just the Wacht am Rhein offensive. So I'm really looking forward to that. I know that I've been talking for a little bit longer. I'm gonna give a shout out to all my Patreon supporters who make it possible for me to make this game, or at least to play this game, which is Pumnarau, Thomas B. Marshall, Dungeon Pastor, Mandingo, and Thomas Loftrelin. Thanks for watching, everyone. Take care. See you next time, and bye-bye.